When I did the original live stream, I meant to cover everything that I'd really worked on this controller, or on my main controller. This is the parts controller. But this is the one that has the triggers that I've repaired. These triggers are actually the ones from my original controller. I swapped these triggers over because that way I could get my old controller back online and working immediately while I repaired these two trigger units. And I'll show you what I did. Anyway, I meant to do that in the original live stream, but I kind of forgot about it. Plus, I was tired. To do this particular repair, there's surprisingly little you have to take apart. You don't even have to undo the ribbon cables like you normally do. Oh, I forgot. I'm only going to take one off, so I'm only going to remove one trigger cover. Once you've got the 4 screws off, the back just pops forward, but you do have to wiggle it a little bit because there are plastic tabs. They aren't the kind that seem likely to shatter like on Apple products. And if you go further into a PS4 than Sony wants you to, you have the same problem. It's really easy to break these tabs. These seem to be pretty strong, which I think is great. Thank you, Scuf. Thank you for doing that. Now, these triggers are sided. They have a left and right side, and they are inverse of each other, which means that they are mirror reflections. They are not interchangeable left or right. This is what you would take out next if you were going to do a more complete disassembly of this. You would pull this ribbon cable out, but in this case you don't really have to because this is close enough to accessible that you can just leave that plugged in. So what you would do is you would pull this and then you would flip the back cover up like so and over. In this case, you just don't need to. Now, each one of these triggers is sided. There's a left and right one, and there's 2 connector points holding it to the hinge, and a third point where there is effectively a resistance, a item that can get hooked onto the trigger. So you have to be careful about that. This is one side, 1 attachment point, 2 attachment point, and the guide/hook thing that keeps the trigger from going too far forward is what it actually does. You can see the black part of the trigger, the rectangle here, and this lighter gray plastic is part of the controller, back part of the controller assembly, and it does not come off, but this black rectangle does as part of the trigger assembly. Now the way you take these off is the side with, oh, I should also point out, this side has a spring. The spring is leaning against a tab that I'm going to show you because it's this tab that breaks. At least so far, I've had 2 of them break, or more correctly, wear out. And that's where, in fact, the repair is going to be. So the side that does not have the spring can be popped out of the hinge relatively easily compared to the side with the spring. So start there, pops right out. You see, it used to be, there's this little shape here, here, and it popped into this spot in the lighter gray housing. Then you want to pull this up a little bit and back a little bit so that you clear, that's, for the amount of light I've got on this thing, it's not very well lit. Let's try that. There we go. Okay, yeah, that's good. This is still, this lighter gray plastic part that's part of the larger frame is still attached, is still inside this rectangle. And it serves a purpose, but it needs to be removed from around that little hook. There we go. Now you can wiggle this slowly and moderately carefully away from the spring towards the outer part of the controller. And that makes the other little hinge point here, let's get that, make sure that's visible. That makes this hinge point here slide out of its holder here. Both of those, these 2 roundy bits go into these parts of the slot. This is the actual trigger button. You don't have to do anything with it for the repair that I've seen. I'm going to move this out of the way for a sec. This is a protrusion of plastic off of the trigger itself. The spring, which, let's move this back in. The spring, which you can still see here, is present so that when you push the trigger, it gets pushed back out. It's very small, but it's mostly strong enough, except if you can see this little white line, I'm going to get this the best light I can. If you can see that little white line in the black plastic, that little white line is the gouge that the spring wore into this little plastic tab. It wears further and further into the tab until the spring actually comes out of the little holding spot that it's supposed to be in, and then your triggers don't return anymore, and then your triggers fire constantly. This is as insanely annoying as you would expect. All that you have to do to fix this, though, is disassemble as shown, and then fill this with some sort of high plastic bonding, high strength epoxy. It needs to be high strength because otherwise the spring will just tear through it again. And it needs to be high plastic bonding because otherwise the spring will push these two sides of the clip apart and just sort of make its way down between all the material you added and the material that's already there. And that'll break it pretty good too, and probably faster. Now what I use for this and projects like it is something called PC11. It is a white plastic epoxy. It says it cures in 24 hours. I've never seen it cure that fast. I don't know if there's something wrong with the way I'm using it, but if you don't mind how long it takes, like let it sit for 3 days. I am serious, 3 days. And if you do that, then it's incredibly strong, it's incredibly sticky, and it's pretty safe to work with for that matter, which is pretty nice. When you're mixing this, you take equal parts out of both ends of the tube. The tube has, come here. The tube has 2 lids, one for the A part of the epoxy, the B part of the epoxy, one for the A part of the epoxy. You get some like popsicle sticks and pull out equal amounts with separate sticks, because if you mix this in the can, there's a divider here. If you mix it in the can, it'll ruin. But if you take out equal parts and then mix in your hands, literally, you can do it without a glove, but use a glove because I let it sit on my fingers too long once and I had to sandpaper it off. I had very smooth fingers. It was not good. But then, getting back to the actual controller topic, I filled in this gap completely, and I didn't care actively about leaving the little notch here because I knew I would just be sanding it down. And I did on one side, and apparently forgot on the back side on this controller, but that's okay. It's not in the way of anything, and it's extra thickness, so extra strength. Let it dry completely, sand it down if you want to, and most importantly, get again, a tiny saw. I just tend to use tiny saws a lot. And put the notch back into place here so that the spring over here has a place to rest and push the trigger back out. And after 3 days, you can just, you put it back in the same way that you took it out, just backwards. Get it up here. It's going to be a little squibbly. That's okay. Slide this side into that part of the hinge. Don't worry about the spring yet. Get the rectangle here back over the little gray hook underneath it, like so, and then just pop that side of the hinge back in place. Then all you have to do is make sure the spring, can you see that? Hopefully. The spring here is pushed back into the little hook in the tab, like that, and now your controller's fixed. Now the reason I wanted to take the time in the original video, I just forgot, to highlight that is because I've had both triggers do it. It's not a manufacturer defect, it's just how they wear out. And if you are a heavy gamer with a Scuf controller, that's, as far as I can tell, that's just going to happen. Why am I having a hard time putting this back in the right place? There we go. At that point, you're done. Just click everything back together. Don't forget to put your trigger guard back on. And that's it. That's all you have to do. And the reason, like I said, I wanted to cover that is because every Scuf controller, I don't know that every Scuf controller, but every Scuf controller I've used a lot has had either that wear happen or kind of be in progress. So that is a part that ages more than probably any other. I shouldn't say that, other than the sticks, which age incredibly quickly. That's what ages the second fastest as far as I can tell. And anyway, now controller's back. So thanks for coming by. Sorry it took me so bloody long to get back to this thing, but I feel good about having done it at least. And hopefully if somebody else has this problem, they will be able to fix it themselves, just like I did. And to be clear, I am not sponsored by these people. Somebody I know recommended it to me and said, here, you have this problem. This is a solution for this problem. You should get it. And I did, and it was. So thanks for coming by, and I will talk to you all later.